Hi everyone. I want to talk about this really interesting article. I want to relate back to I first read the article a year or so ago, and the title of the article is called 80 Most Influential Americans Over 80. Now, I'm not saying that we should be looking up to all of these people listed in this article. There's several people in this article named and listed that I don't really agree with. I don't agree with them for several reasons. I don't agree with them for their history, their objectives, their responsibilities, and many different things that have occurred over the past 50 years or so. Policies that they've played a role in and in making and affecting the outcome of the world. But I'm going to list some of these people. I might even try and list all of them if I can. I think it would be very interesting. Now, be prepared for a lot of name dropping. There's going to be a lot of name dropping in this article. This video, that's for sure. But, let's go. Let's get started. Basically, what I'm going to explain is I'm going to explain how I know these people. Or, I haven't met them. Some of them I have met, though. And some of them I do know very well. And some of them I look up to, and some of them I consider to be role models and people that we should look up to. All young people should look up to have someone, who's an octogenarian, so to speak, to look up to. Now, let's get started. Now, the first person named in the article, his name is Rupert Murdoch. Now, I don't agree with Rupert Murdoch for several reasons. I believe he's the former owner of Fox News, and a lot of the content that is on Fox News is very, very biased. It's right-wing, and they really further agendas that benefit people of the Republican Party and those that a lot of their policies I don't agree with. I don't agree with enriching the wealthy and keeping a stranglehold on the poor. That's something that I think that's a crime against humanity. When you look at the vast majority of the American populace and you see that so many people, have been drained of their wealth and resources, while many of these people have been enriched. Rupert Murdoch is filthy rich. He has at least $10 billion. He owns homes in Los Angeles and the Hamptons. And across the world, he has a media empire. But that's enough about him. Next up is John Madden, who's 80 years old. He's a former sports broadcaster. Now, I don't really like football that much, so I'm just going to skip over him. Next up, Henry Kissinger. He actually lives in Connecticut, known war criminal, involved in the decimation of Cambodia and Vietnam. He played a role in many war crimes, and I really don't want to talk about him that much either. And next up, it just gets better and better. Next up, Alan Greenspan. One of Time Magazine's 25 people responsible for the Great Recession. Another individual that, a lot of questionable individuals named in this article. Okay, here's someone interesting that they name, Robert Redford, who's 80 years old. He's done some good work. He's done good work in help cleaning up the oceans, and he's an environmentalist. He has a career of being in several films, including The Sting, All the President's Men, and Out of Africa, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, famous film. I believe Paul Newman was in that film also. Moving on, we have Sidney Poitier. I think my mother went to school with his granddaughter in New York. Very good actor. He was in several films, including Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. He's probably one of the greatest actors of all time. Next up, we have Noam Chomsky, who's a writer and academic. as a linguist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Noam Chomsky refuted the prevailing view of language acquisition and helped lay the groundwork for the modern study of linguistics. Chomsky has authored roughly 120 books on topics that include linguistics, U.S. foreign policy, international politics, and media, and is one of the most cited academics of all time. He's also probably one of the smartest people on this planet. I heard that he has an IQ of at least 180. He's certainly one of the smartest people out there. Very intelligent individual. Stan Lee, who's the comic book creator, I believe, he introduced the populace to so many lovable characters, including Spider-Man, the Hulk, and X-Men. Definitely someone to look up to if you're a fan of those comics and those films. Next up, we have Gordon Moore, the famous Gordon Moore. He is the electrical engineer and founder of Intel. That's the Intel computer chips that are used in computers. Gordon Moore founded Intel in 1968 and has helped grow the company into the largest semiconductor manufacturer today. Through decades of innovation at the vanguard of semiconductor technology, Moore and Intel have managed to fulfill the tenets of Moore's Law. Moore's Law, the famous Moore's Law. The forecast that chip performance will double every 2 years. And of course, next up we have Ralph Nader, who's mentioned. So let's see what they say about my friend Ralph Nader. In the 1960s, consumer advocate Ralph Nader devoted himself to criticizing the safety standards of the auto and food industries. Nader's testimonies to Congress and advocacy work led to seatbelt laws, slaughterhouse regulations. I remember he was talking about the slaughterhouse regulations the last time I met with him. And numerous other regulations, most notably his book Unsafe at Any Speed, about the 1965 Chevrolet Corvair, which is very funny. They have a Chevrolet Corvair reconstructed and set up in Ralph Nader's Tort Museum up in Winstead. It's definitely a sight to see. I would definitely try and visit that museum if anyone's ever interested. I've thought about bringing students up to Winstead for a field trip at some point. Maybe we could all take a tour of the Tort Museum, plus stop by the Law Works bookstore. And there's also some nice restaurants in the Winstead area. We can make it into like a day trip, and that's something that I was interested in doing. And of course it says, though Nader himself contests the theory, many believe his Green Party run in 2000 siphoned votes from Democrat Al Gore and ultimately led to the election of George W. Bush. I disagree with that. I think Al Gore really could have set up a much better campaign. I wouldn't want to think it was so much the actions of Ralph Nader's candidacy as much as it was Al Gore's failed candidacy. I really think that a lot of people viewed Al Gore in a negative light for many reasons. I think they didn't like his last name, Gore. I remember people saying that all the time, that they didn't like his last name, Gore. Ooh, gory. I don't like that. And of course, names and appearances really make a difference. They say that he walked around like a stiff, and that he wasn't really that engaging with the people. So that was the fault of Al Gore, and I don't blame Ralph Nader for that. Now, next up, more interesting people in their 80s that they mention here. Let's see. Some of these people have since passed on, including Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry was, I'd like to consider Chuck Berry as the father of rock and roll music. He certainly helped pioneer rock and roll during the 50s. It says about him, singer and guitarist Chuck Berry has influenced music in a way few people, living or dead, have. Credited by many as the father of rock and roll, Berry's Johnny B. Goode and Maybelline jump-started a generation of musicians. According to some, without Berry's music, groups like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the Beach Boys might never have existed. Now I would definitely say the Rolling Stones would not have existed if it weren't for Chuck Berry. And definitely AC/DC would not have existed if it weren't for Chuck Berry, that's for sure. But the Beatles, I don't know. The Beatles, I believe they would have existed I think if it weren't for Buddy Holly, the Beatles, like if Buddy Holly didn't exist, the Beatles wouldn't have existed. And the reason why I credit Buddy Holly is because I believe all four of the band members of the Beatles looked up to Buddy Holly and his music. And what's interesting, I sang a song and I posted it up on Facebook before, and it was all about the story of Buddy Holly. That's American Pie by Don McLean. Yeah, he definitely made an impact on the world of music and rock and roll. Who else do they have listed here? They have a lot of interesting people listed here. Wow, so many of these people have since passed on. They mentioned Billy Graham. Billy Graham preached in 185 nations and was seen in person by hundreds of millions of people. I believe Billy Graham is still alive today. Graham was also spiritual advisor to several presidents. He helped introduce Martin Luther King Jr. at one of his annual televised crusades and bailed Martin Luther King Jr. out of jail when he was arrested during a civil rights protest. That's interesting. Who else do they have listed here? Jimmy Carter, of course. Jimmy Carter served from 1977 to 1981 as the 39th President of the United States. While he only served a single term, his time as president can be defined by his belief in peace and human rights, the same beliefs that have guided his life as ex-president. Since he left the White House, he has started a not-for-profit dedicated to its mission to end human suffering and has personally built houses for the homeless, fought to eradicate diseases in Africa, and promoted democracy and world peace. In 2002, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his dedication to peace, human rights, and economic development. Now, here's a man that we should all look up to. I mean, here's someone that we should all look up to. He builds houses for the poor, and he's 92 years old. I believe he's 93. He's probably going to be 94 this year. He's still building houses for the poor, and I salute you, Jimmy Carter. I really do, and I appreciate all the good work that you are doing. Now, I'm going to list a few more people, because I know this video probably has, yeah, got 12 and a half minutes here. Who else do they list that's worth? I mean, I think they all have made many accomplishments in their own right. Okay. They mention James Watson. I read his book, The Double Helix. That was very interesting. Now, James Watson is a scientist and author. He helped discover the double helix, which was basically the map of DNA. In 1953, scientists James Watson and Francis Crick discovered the double helix structure of DNA. The discovery shed light on how genetic information is passed from generation to generation. The double helix was one of the most important scientific discoveries of the 20th century and allowed for subsequent revolutions in medicine, disease diagnosis, forensic science, and agriculture, as well as insights into human history. For their work, Watson and Crick were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1962. And what's really interesting about that is that was the same year John Steinbeck won. And I remember seeing a picture of all of them together. I remember John Steinbeck was in that picture. So that's really cool. This article is definitely biased. They definitely, I don't know why they don't mention that many women in this article. Wow, 90%. Okay, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, amazing woman. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 83 years old at the time of this article being printed. It says, before being appointed to the Supreme Court by President Bill Clinton in 1993, Ruth Bader Ginsburg served as the director of the Women's Rights Project at the American Civil Liberties Union. Now, ladies, this is a woman you need to have as your role model, all right? Instead of the Kardashians, instead of Britney Spears, try and have Ruth Bader Ginsburg as your role model. She is definitely someone to look up to. And men too. We should all look up to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Before being appointed, okay, As a Supreme Court justice, Ginsburg famously wrote a dissenting opinion in the court's decision in Bush versus Gore. There we go. It's all interconnected. It was instrumental in upholding the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. I think she has done an amazing amount of work, and I heard that she does like 50 push-ups a day, at least. She is definitely someone to look up to, and I really hope, hopefully she will be able to stick around for the next few years, considering everything that's happening here in America. And on that note, I would like to conclude this video and say thank you for watching. Alright, thank you.